Hey guys, it's Alyssa and Nicole here. We are back. We're going to talk about renters' rights right now and how it's going to affect landlords and what landlords' rights are. There's been a lot of talk about the eviction moratorium and whether or not people have to pay right now. So we're going to give you the facts. Nicole, tell us what's going on.
So our governor, Gavin Newsom, ordered a statewide temporary ban on evictions. I'm going to go through exactly what that says in regards to the requirements, specifically if you're a renter and if you're a landlord watching this, this is what your tenant needs to have or provide you with in order to qualify. So here's what it says. The requirements are: prior to the date of this order, the tenant has paid rent due to the landlord pursuant to an agreement. So if you haven't been paying your rent,
Yeah,
tough
add
luck.
a laugh.
Exactly. The second thing it says is that the tenant notifies the landlord in writing before rent is due or within a reasonable period of time afterwards, not to exceed 7 days, that the tenant needs to delay all or some payment of rent because of an inability to pay the full amount due to reasons related to COVID-19, included but not limited to the following.
So
So,
today's April 4th. So
mhm.
people have 3 more days to submit this in writing. So what are the reasons?
Here are the reasons. First, the tenant was unavailable to work because the tenant was sick with a suspected or confirmed case of COVID-19, or caring for a household or family member who was sick with a suspected or confirmed case of COVID-19. So that's one.
Okay.
Two, the tenant experienced a layoff, loss of hours, or other income reduction resulting from COVID-19, the state of emergency, or related government response. Or the third, that the tenant needed to miss work to care for a child whose school was closed in response to COVID-19.
Cool. So
So to summarize,
it needs to be one of those reasons. Okay. Um,
so
so
either you were sick, your roommate was sick, whoever if your grandparent or somebody or a parent lived with you and you were caring for them, you qualified because you weren't able to work, or if you actually lost your job, or they cut your hours, or
those reasons. So number one, the tenant has to document it. So if you're a landlord and your tenant just doesn't pay, they're not covered. They have to actually tell you why. So then the tenant retains verifiable documentation such as termination notices, payroll checks, pay stubs, bank statements, medical bills, or signed letters or statements from an employer or supervisor explaining the tenant's change financial circumstances to support the tenant's assertion of an inability to pay. This documentation may be provided to the landlord no later than the time upon payment of back due rent.
so you got to have verifiable documentation. If you have any questions about what that looks like, along with the letter that you should be sending your landlord, shoot us a message, and we've got copies of examples of both.
Perfect.
So,
Also, it looks like upon payment of back due rent, so nobody's getting out of jail free. Getting out of jail free, the rent will become due, and landlords will be able to go after people for not paying rent once this is all over.
yeah, especially if you haven't provided them with this documentation.
Okay.
The other thing it mentions in here is that no writ may be enforced while this order is in effect to evict a tenant from a residence or dwelling unit for non-payment of rent who satisfies the requirements above. And nothing in this order shall prevent a tenant who is able to pay all or some of the rent due from paying that rent in a timely manner or relieve a tenant of liability for unpaid rent.
So
So,
again,
go ahead.
I was going to say, again, you got to pay at some point. So if you can pay, even if it's a portion, you should. That way this doesn't snowball and you're going to have to pay a ton of money all at once.
Exactly. I know that tenant and landlord relationships can sometimes be tricky, but remember, everybody's in the same boat here, or at least a lot of people are. So just, work with your landlord, work with your tenants. If, if there's a solution that you guys can come to together, that's probably the best solution. These are just things put out to help people that are in need, that have had financial hardships due to the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think as a landlord, try not offer your tenants options. So if somebody is truly laid off because of this and doesn't have the funds to pay, maybe get them on a repayment plan so it's stretched out over the following year or that.
Totally. And what were you telling me earlier about landlords? What recourse do they have? Is there any way that they can cover their mortgage if their tenants aren't paying?
Absolutely. So if we go back to the CARES Act, the Corona Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, on a federal level, they have put some stipulations in here for people who have a mortgage and can't pay their mortgage because the tenant's not paying them. So owners of multifamily properties who are current on their mortgage payments as of February 1st and have federally insured, assisted, or supplemented loans, they can request a forbearance for 30 days due to financial hardship. A tenant not paying their rent would be considered financial hardship. With extensions of a total of 90 days. Borrowers receiving the forbearance may not evict or charge late fees to tenants for the duration of the forbearance period. So,
okay. So that's something, at least.
yeah, so if your tenant's not paying, you don't necessarily have to pay. And that way, when they become current, you can become current.
Totally.
Then there's also a federal moratorium on eviction filings or fees or penalties for tenants for non-payment of rent for 120 days on properties insured, guaranteed, supplemented, protected, or assisted in any way by HUD, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the Rural Housing Voucher Program covered by the Violence Against Women Act of 1994.
Okay.
So pretty much, if you're in a government-backed loan, your tenants have a lot more
leeway.
Yeah, rights to kind of not get evicted than if you're in a non-government-backed loan. So be aware of that. I don't know how a tenant would find out what type of loan their landlord is in. So it's kind of a funny thing, but you should be aware as a landlord that if you're in one of these government-backed loans, it may be a little bit trickier for you.
Totally. Good to know. Also, in regards to tenants, if you have any questions or don't know how your scenario applies, there are two numbers that we'll be putting down in the comments below. One's for the Legal Aid Society of San Diego, and the other is the Tenants Legal Center. So both of those are hotlines that you can call if you have any questions or you don't know, whether or not your loss of income qualifies or anything like that.
Whether you're a tenant or a landlord and you need help, reach out to us. We can try to answer your question. If we don't know the answer, we can help you find out. So definitely difficult times. Hopefully that gives you guys some insight as to what you can do if people aren't paying rent or if you've had a loss of income and you can't pay rent. That's on kind of the housing side of things. I think the next topic we're going to discuss is from a business perspective. What can you do if you can't rent your retail space anymore because you're not open to make money? All those types of things. So, all
right, you guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and like Alyssa said last video, stay inside.
All right, bye guys, thanks.